Greetings, gamers. Tim here again. And I recorded this video, but the sound didn't come out very well. I did a normal blog, the sound didn't come out well, and so I'm trying to reshoot this video. It may be shorter and less rambly than the previous version of this video, I hope, in order to make up for the fact that my voice is trying to go away because I've been talking nonstop for a couple of hours, sort of, trying to get it to work. Now, this is another Game Design 101. We might call this Part 3. I'm not sure because I don't remember what the other two parts were. I mean, I remember them, but I'm not sure we should call this Part 3 or Game Design 102, as in taking the next step up. Now, when I explain this to people, I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm not trying to be hurtful. If you show me fiction for a game, I will read it, under normal circumstances. I can't read everybody's, but I'll read it and I'll probably enjoy it. If you show me the dice mechanics for a game system, I will examine them, I'll take a look, and I may talk about them a little bit. Again, I can't do that for everybody, but just I'm trying to give you the general idea of what I do. However, neither of those things are a game. What do you mean? They're part of a game. They're a chapter in a game. They're a section in the game. They are steps in a game, but they are not themselves the game. A dice mechanic alone is not the game. It's a start, just like creating a character is a start, or writing fiction is a start if you want to write fiction for a game. I'll be honest though, if you want to write a lot of fiction for a game, you probably should be working more on novels or short novellas for Kindle or wherever you wish to publish them, because the vast majority of time game fiction is kind of wasted. I mean, I enjoy it myself because it sets the mood. It gives me an idea of what gameplay is intended to be like. But there are a lot of people out there who just don't care. They will skip it entirely. And there have been games when I'm like, I open up the book and I look at the fiction and I'm like, ugh, I'm done. Not that I'm done with the game, just that I'm done reading the fiction. I'm not talking about people I'm trying to give feedback to. I'm never going to do that to them, because the thing is, if they're asking me at the stage before it's published, we can have a dialogue about what they can do to prevent somebody from having the reaction. But there are games which has a lot of fiction in them, and they actually get in the way of playing the game or running the game. Especially games which a lot of their fiction or their other elements take a lot of reading, because let's be honest, you want to sit down, you want to play a game with your friends, but you have one copy of a rule book, and it will take 4 people, 5 people, an hour and a half to read all these details that the game wants you to know about in those kinds of overly fictionally compressed games. And that's, in some cases, necessary to understand enough about the game world to play. Now, the nice thing is, not all games do that. Some games don't even bother. To give you an example, here's one that doesn't give you any fiction, just the ideas that you play. Little tiny thing called Luchador Way of the Mask. I'm playing this right now. And it gives you the idea of what kind of things can exist in a luchador adventure, because you're a luchador, and it's a very pulp-y game, except instead of pulp shadow character, you have the pulp luchador character, and everybody's a luchador, and wrestling is a big part of it. So, but then there are games that spend an inordinate amount of time giving you pages and pages of fiction, and that's fun. If you're a reader who likes that fiction, it's cool. But it's not a whole game. And that's the thing. It's not even necessary for some games. But then neither is, a die mechanic may be necessary, but it's not always necessary, because there are games that you spend points. There are games where you use cards. But fiction is cool. Don't overdo it. Dice mechanics or whatever mechanism you are using to resolve actions are cool. But individually, these things are not the game. Together, they are not the game. They are a chapter or a start of the game. And the reason I'm going over this twice is I believe in a game explaining how you get a character made. I believe in a game that explains how that character interacts with the world, what mechanics it uses to influence things going on around them. Physical, social, mental, whatever the game has to be about. I believe the game needs to explain character creation. I believe it needs to explain the steps that they influence the world. It needs to explain the mechanics that work for that. And it needs to explain, enough of the world or the genre, if it's a genre-focused game, that we understand it. And all together, you start adding these things up and you get a game. But I've been asked several times to look at somebody's game, and they've given me dice mechanics, or they've given me a bit of fiction. And while I don't, as I said, I don't ever mind reading that, I don't ever mind giving feedback on that, those are not complete games. They are just parts. It's like you handing me a chessboard with no chess pieces and saying, let's play chess. Well, technically, we can probably work something out on the chessboard. It's not a full game of chess because we don't have our chess pieces. And chess is one of the simplest games out there. It has fundamentally two pieces, the board and the miscellaneous, icons for characters, so to speak. But and Go was another one. You have a board, you have your, I don't know what to call them, marbles that you use to jump and form patterns and all this other stuff. Very simple games, very robust gameplay. But if you only have one piece of them rather than the whole package, it doesn't work. It doesn't work as a whole thing. That doesn't mean you can't write a game that has no fiction. You can just write rules. There are many successful games that do that. But you need to do something very important, which is all this babbling is intended to game. You need to explain how a character does an action, how the player resolves that action, and how that impacts what's going on. That isn't just a dice mechanism. That is, how does a character go? Well, here's an example. A character is fleeing from a monster. It decides to, he or she decides to run and jump over a ravine. Only because of the mechanisms we have in play, they just barely grab it on their fingertips and then have to pull themselves up on the other side. What you need before you get anywhere in game writing fundamentally is a way, and you can write everything else. You can write it separately and then put it together later. But before you have a game, you have to be able to take a character through an action and give it results. That is, A, character doing something, B, the thing they're doing equals C, the result. A plus B equals C. Very simple. Or it could be 1 plus 2 equals 3. It doesn't really matter what euphemism I use for those steps, but those are steps. And I know at least one game designer who has written several games that are popular that doesn't understand A plus B equals C. He does not understand how to put together. It may be because he's writing them all individually instead of writing them as one thing, and then pulling chapters out and rewriting those chapters and not going back to make those chapters flow together. And apparently in a couple of games he didn't have editorial. Nobody was a content editor. You have editors for the grammar and spelling and all that, but you sometimes have a content editor if you're not a little one game person like me, where you're the whole, you're all that. Of course, I hire a grammar editor and spelling editor, and I hire artists, but those are things I do to make my games better. But I am both the line editor or the content editor and the writer and the creator and the publisher, producer, whatever terms you want to use. But this writer Good guy. He's a great writer, except he does not tell us how to go A plus B equals C. And that is a problem because you can explain a dice mechanic. You can explain situations where the dice mechanic comes up. But if you can't input a character into that, and I mean from the beginning give A plus B plus equals, well I keep saying plus, but equals C. If you can't take it from here are steps in character creation, here are steps in mechanics resolution, here's what the resolution turns out, and here is the final things you describe or explain. If you can't take it through all those steps, you have not written a complete game. Not in my mind. Now, I may be unique in that because this man's games are somewhat popular, as I said, but they had, at least one of them had several hundred posts of outside people, not related with the game company, explaining the game to people who were not getting it. And that says to me that rather than that however many people were not getting it are obtuse or don't understand, what it explains to me is that the person who was writing the game did not understand how to correctly explain it. Now, some people put A plus B plus C together on their own in their heads, and that's fine. And that's fine. I can do it sometimes. Some games in question make it harder than others. For instance, this Luchador game up here, it does give me A plus B equals C of a sort, but its mechanism is a little rough and tumble. It's a D20, roll under your skill, which is based on an attribute that you randomly rolled of a sort, because you get a template that you build your character on, an archetype. And I don't always understand the way success or failure works, because it's a roll under with degrees of success roll under. So that means the lower you roll under, I believe, the better it is. So if I roll a 5 and my score is 15, I've got a 10 whatever. But if I roll a 1 and my number's 15, there's more steps in there. And it's kind of clumsy for my brain to frame things that way. I am much more of a roll and add and produce a bonus kind of guy. So various systems work better for me. Unisystem, D20. I'm not a big fan of D20, but I know how it works. I understand pretty simply the basic idea of roll a D20, add a stat, add a skill, hit a DC number. I like that. That's a dice mechanism. That is not a whole game. The whole game includes character creation, explaining character options, taking that dice mechanic, explaining what difficulties mean, and turning it into on the board or in your head fiction of a sort, creating the play environment that you share with other people. And I believe that more people should do A plus B equals C on their games, because there aren't many that fail at it completely, but there are occasionally some that miss. They get A in there and they're like A and then something and C, or they get B in there, this is how you do this, and C, but they don't explain how the character plugs into that, and it's problematic. 99% of games work just fine, which is one reason I said this is Game Design 102 or Part 3 or whatever, is that when you are explaining a game, explain it like you're explaining it to somebody who has never picked up a book before, a role-playing game before, who's never played a single role-playing game. I'm not saying give them the big what is role-playing thing, but explain the steps to them of how to mechanically do these things clearly enough that they will understand the steps. Now, everybody learns differently, which creates a little bit of an issue because, as I said, some people adapt to the situation where A does not have those plus signs and those equal signs in them. They exist, but it's like A is over here and B is over here, and they don't explain how they connect together. But your job is to, as a game designer, is to put in that plus, A plus B, and that equal sign equals C, and get all, and put in the A, B's, and C's as well. But some game designers don't do that well. For a game that does it very well in a very short amount of space, look up the Rissus role-playing game, the Rissus anything role-playing game. It gives you A plus B equals C in a little over a page, depending on your font. I've seen single-page versions of Rissus, but so it's not like we're talking about a huge amount of effort. What we're doing is talking about connecting the dots. You've put the dots down, fill in the blanks. You know, or color the picture, or however you want to perceive it. I have played plenty of role-playing games, and some of them do not connect the dots. Some of them connect the dots erratically, but the important thing is you've got to get those connections down. You've got to get them working as a game designer. And I may not be the best at explaining stuff, but my personal opinion is explain it to an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old how to play this game without you being there. With just what you wrote down on a piece of paper, explain it to an 8-year-old. Why? Because I started role-playing when I was 8, and I understood it. Now, we didn't do everything right, but I understood the A plus B equals C elements for the most part. We ignored a lot of rules. We didn't use them. It happened. But we still got A plus B equals C. We still got make a character. Here's how you resolve stuff the character does. Here's how you describe what the results of that are. And it's all about the process of gaming. It's like describing to... Have you ever done a flowchart? Maybe that's how I should put it. Have you ever done a flowchart? Back when they were teaching us computer programming, this is way, way back when computers were not measured in megabytes. No, they were not. But way back then, when computers were not measured in megabytes or gigabytes or soon terabytes, programming, we were taught flowcharts first. And the reason we were taught flowcharts was because you have step, and then you have another step, and then you have options that the computer can choose, and then you have steps. And game design is like that. It's showing people how to start it here and get this outcome down here. So it's A plus B plus C. And that's me talking and babbling on about this subject way too long. But fundamentally, you know, we have to explain the process of gaming, how to go from every step. And I mean that. I mean, you know, don't say, oh, don't skip part of character creation because it's hard to figure out how to explain it to somebody. Explain it to somebody. Explain it to an 8-year-old. At least an 8-year-old. You could probably go younger. I know that I have run games for kids younger than 8. And the best one for that was really simple because it's A plus B plus C was literally just almost that. So, but, you know, take my advice. Learn how to go through the process of gaming. How to input ideas for character creation and character steps. Added to what a character can do as actions and describing how they go about those actions. How mechanically does the game resolve jumping over a ravine? Is there a chance they can fall at the end? How do you create that chance that they cling to by their fingertips? If you want that in the game, you might want them to leap over the ravine and not even worry about it. But you still need to describe mechanically the rules for how those steps jump from one to the other. Anyway, I know this one's kind of long. My voice is going, and I babbled a bit more than I intended about this subject. So, peace, good gaming, and I'll see you next time.